larger impact there, so I'm going to have to message her later this evening and make sure that she's in good shape to perhaps drive north away from the system, if that's where it's to make landfall. But just a lot going on here, guys. Let's see. I used to live in Jupiter, have many friends and family there in Palm Beach County and plenty of in the West Coast, Port Richey and Largo. Thanks, Eric. I seriously don't think that this will affect you in Cincinnati. Now here in Florida, we are ready and waiting. Plenty of gas for our generator, windows boarded, waiting for 100-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, Nikki, this is really for, I understand that by the time it impacts us here in Cincinnati, it's 3 or 4 days down the road, and we're going to see heavy rain, nothing like what you're seeing in Florida. This is more for our local residents who perhaps have family down in Florida, who you know, maybe they listen to me on the air, and they have for a little while, and they trust what I have to say, and this is just another avenue for them to get some information. So obviously, I'm not broadcasting this to Cincinnati to tell them to seek shelter. I'm broadcasting this to folks in Cincinnati to maybe reach out to their friends and family in Florida, make sure they're doing okay, to try to, I guess it would be maybe answer some of their questions. Obviously, everyone in Florida is getting ready. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Zarnitz. I'm a meteorologist right here in Cincinnati at WLWT Channel 5. We are tracking a major hurricane. I'm sure you've heard all about it. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, normally I'd say, and while it's not directly impacting Cincinnati just yet, less fear. It is impacting our friends. But in this case, we're dealing with such a powerful storm down across the Sunshine State. I know a lot of us here in Ohio tend to vacation a dangerous situation side of Florida. I do anywhere from Tampa to Sarasota to Clearwater, all the way down through Naples and Marco Island. And it looks like those few unfortunate souls, even for those who prepare for something like that. I'm going to do my best to try to keep you up to speed. I'm just trying to help keep in mind I do have and obviously I've got my own show to prepare for you. Our 6 o'clock news begins and start forecasting shortly. I just wanted to sort of be on here for the 5 o'clock update, which comes out here in just a few more minutes, and try to let you guys know as much as I can. Is anyone concerned about it going real quick? I'm going to share this to a few other accounts that it's not going to turn. Hey, Kyla, I would say that systems like this, the biggest problem is, when does it turn? Now, there's a lot of confidence. Basically, most of the computer models that we look at, so obviously we're dealing with what was formerly a Category 5 every piece of information that we have. It is weakened that we collect through airplanes, went through Cat 4, it's now weakened to a Category 3 hurricane, but it takes all that information, and the reason why that's happened is you can see it takes all of that, and then it spits out a forecast. Cuba's a fairly mountainous state, and as it works its way right collaborations of those models, and they all give different answers. Right now, the majority of the models that we deem as being, and while it's still fairly tropical down there, they're all having this thing curve off to the terrain, but there is a little discrepancy in when exactly that happens. Does it curve to the north and hit the panhandle of Florida? Does it curve to the north and hit Tampa Bay? Does it curve to the north and directly hit Marco Island? Those are questions. So that's something that I can't answer you. But you'll also see meteorologists looking at the situation. If I really got down in depth and took a look at this trough and at the ridge, but as it heads back out into the Caribbean, and there's such minor occurrences in the atmosphere, it does look that we're going to see some strength. It's basically terrible news. Trying to take such a low, it's already being impacted by this currently, like you're talking 5 to 10, 15 mile-an-hour winds, those are shifting the course of this hurricane. And you can see how the majority of them just trying to time that out perfectly is nearly impossible. Or a northerly turn every hour this thing trucks west, and right now it shifts like the threat from Miami to Tampa to Sarasota, and maybe eventually if you look at the, so that's something if you look at the actual forecast fan, and that'll be coming up here in the rundown pretty shortly. Let's see. Janice saying her brother lives in Tampa. Stay out in the Gulf. I think of Randy's brother lives in Tampa. If it continues west, instead of making that sharp northerly turn, I've got friends and family. It may head a little farther out to the Gulf of Mexico, but with a big ridge starting to break down. What about Metro Atlanta? Hey, Amanda. I think Atlanta's going to eventually see some heavy rain out of this. Pundi, hey! Eventually steer the storm. That's going back a long way. Florida. I think Metro Atlanta is going to eventually see some heavy rain out of this, maybe some winds, but the threat for you was much higher a couple days ago when it looked as though this thing may hit the east coast of Florida, re-emerge into the Atlantic, and then perhaps 6 to 9 feet in many cases down right now, I'd say yes, Atlanta is most likely you're going to get some rain out of this, sort of like Cincinnati. You may even get some wind, basically down to most of the perhaps the real problems are going to be down to your south of Florida. All places being impacted, and then I've got a good friend He's saying the track has changed so much yesterday. The track was going right over me. I would. Now, let me just say, when you look at the track, it's the forecast black and white image. Yeah, we put a red line down the middle of it. I turned it black and white. I actually, when I put those graphics together, I try to take that red line out simply because it's a forecast fan. Anywhere within that fan can get hit. That line down the middle that so many of us use, that is right down through the eye. That's the best guess. Again, anywhere in that fan is a place we can get hit. Sometimes anyone in that fan should take this very seriously. That's what we're seeing this afternoon. Let's see. So I said I would answer a couple of questions. I'm sure there's plenty of folks. I've got a lot of people in my commenting in here a little bit. A lot of it, I'm sure there are with all of you out there too. But now I turn the mic. It's just Allison saying hi, and you can see that red box in some of my graphics over South Florida. Thanks for saying hi. Everyone gets new last names. So hard. Obviously, you have a landfall and hurricane, so it's got its own wind. But on the outer bands, you also have supercell storms, sort of like what we deal with here in the Midwest, and those can very easily put down tornadoes. And unfortunately, they're all rain wrapped because it's so humid down there. What's important is to look at the supercell tornadoes that are put down on top of this heavy rain, on top of this storm surge, on top of the extreme wind within the eye. I spent 3 hours heading our way. What you're looking at right now, that's the radar. It's now getting close enough to Key West and our Miami radars where we can pick up some of this imagery. I spoke to some friends from high school earlier today. And again, see some of these strong supercells and bands coming through Miami, coming through just to the south of West Palm Beach, and just I've lived in the Midwest now, studying meteorology for a long time, so my expertise. Montgomery, Alabama, I'd say you're in the same. I would say snowstorms. Well, you know, when it comes to tropical weather, I don't think you've got. We don't have crazy things to worry about yet. I haven't dealt with a tropical system. Montgomery's far enough inland where I don't think you're going to have these big issues out of this, at least at this point. But Mobile, Alabama, obviously living in Cincinnati, because they've gone through this Florida a couple of times. That's another location where I think it's a little west of where this thing's going to make landfall. But again, that's why these next couple of hours are so crucial. What we see in the next 12 hours, when this thing turns to the north, that's what's going to gauge exactly where it makes landfall. He's at 4:52. Every once in a while, the Hurricane Center will put out their update a little bit early. So I want to look and see if there's any new information. He has a lot of friends. I think they're doing it every hour now, but they still do the forecast discussions. He's been a professor now for about 20 years at these specific times. He has a lot of input. No new information yet. A lot of his blogs trying to keep up with everything. But I'll do my best to help you out. I know I'm probably talking to a lot of. So I'm going to stay on with you for the next 5-10 minutes at the very least. Maybe some friends down in Florida, and perhaps some folks who are just looking for a live feed of data. I'll keep this going for as long as I can. I think these live streams they bog out at about 4 hours. But I also have a show here working on getting this all put together, and now I've got to go work on the forecast. Thankfully in Cincinnati, but I at least wanted to get this information out there for anybody who's interested. And I'll be tuning in from time to time with any updates as they come in. Obviously, our next big hurricane update happens right at 5 o'clock. And what I'm seeing from this is it looks as though, again, I'm just looking at the satellite data, same as you. The eye isn't quite as clear as it was yesterday. I would say the system is probably holding its own as a strong Category 3 hurricane. Maybe it's increased just a little bit to a Cat 4. That's what I'd anticipate when the latest update comes out at 5 o'clock. Also, this thing it hasn't taken that northward shift yet. Maybe the last couple of frames have just started it, but it's still mostly going in a westerly direction. So that forecast fan may shift slightly to the west, and I think the strength is going to stay the same. As far as the forecast goes, I think this is pretty much straight on. Strengthening to a Category 4, I think that's likely. I can't rule out it being a Category 5 if it was to stay a little bit longer in the Gulf, simply because the Gulf waters are so warm. So that's a real threat and something we'll have to pay attention to. I have a good friend who also went down for a wedding down in Destin, Florida, and I talked to her a couple of days ago thinking that hurricane was going to hit the east coast of Florida, and now it looks a little more destined for, no pun intended, for the Panhandle. It'll have a larger impact there, so I'm going to have to message her later this evening and make sure that she's in good shape to perhaps drive north away from the system if that's where it's to make landfall. But just a lot going on here, guys. Let's see. I used to live in Jupiter, have many friends and family there in Palm Beach County and plenty of in the West Coast, Port Richey and Largo. Thanks, Eric. I seriously don't think that this will affect you in Cincinnati. Now here in Florida, we are ready and waiting. Plenty of gas for our generator. Windows boarded, waiting for 100-mile-an-hour winds. Yeah, Nikki, this is really for. I understand that by the time it impacts us here in Cincinnati, it's 3 or 4 days down the road, and we're going to see heavy rain. Nothing like what you're seeing in Florida. This is more for our local residents who perhaps have family down in Florida, who you know, maybe they listen to me on the air, and they have for a little while, and they trust what I have to say, and this is just another avenue for them to get some information. So obviously I'm not broadcasting this to Cincinnati to tell them to seek shelter. I'm broadcasting this to folks in Cincinnati to maybe reach out to their friends and family in Florida, make sure they're doing okay, to try to maybe answer some of their questions. Obviously everyone in Florida is getting ready for this big hurricane, and maybe you're having a hard time reaching friends and family down across the Sunshine Coast, and maybe I can answer some of these questions for you. Or unfortunately, in a situation like this, normally I'd say more information usually means less fear, but in this case, when you're dealing with such a powerful storm, it is scary. It's a dangerous situation. Unfortunately, I do think we're going to see loss of life with this. There always happens to be a few unfortunate souls, even for those who prepare for something like this. So yeah, I'm just trying to help people out, and obviously I've got my own show to prepare for here. Our 6 o'clock news begins, and I'm gonna have to start forecasting, but I just wanted to sort of be on here for the 5 o'clock update, which comes out here in just a few more minutes, and try to let you guys know as much as I can. Is anyone concerned about it going through Alabama? That is not going to turn. Hey Kyla, I would say that systems like this, the biggest problem is, when does it turn? Now, there's a lot of confidence. Basically, most of the computer models that we look at, which are basically big supercomputers that take every piece of information that we have, that we collect through airplanes, that we collect through weather balloons, that we collect through ground observations. It takes all that information, satellite imagery, radar imagery. It takes all of that, and then it spits out a forecast. Now we've got 20, 30, you know, and different collaborations of those models, and they all give different answers. Right now, the majority of the models that we deem as being very noteworthy, very reliable, they're all having this thing curve off to the north. But there is a little discrepancy in when exactly that happens. Does it curve to the north and hit the panhandle of Florida? Does it curve to the north and hit Tampa Bay? Does it curve to the north and directly hit Marco Island? Those are questions. That's something that I can't answer you. For most meteorologists looking at the situation, if I really got down in depth and took a look at this trough and at the ridge, there's such weak features and there's such minor occurrences in the atmosphere that it's basically trying to take such a low, like you're talking 5 to 10, 15 mile an hour winds, shifting the course of this hurricane. And just trying to time that out perfectly is nearly impossible. And obviously every hour this thing trucks west, it shifts the threat from Miami to Tampa and maybe eventually to Pensacola. So that's something we're all watching here. I hope that helps. Let's see, Jana's saying her brother lives in Tampa. I think Randy's brother lives in Tampa too, so I know Randy's got a connection down there to Florida. I've got friends and family who travel down there frequently. And let's see. What about Metro Atlanta? Hey, Amanda. I think Atlanta's going to eventually see some heavy rain out of this. Pundi, hey! That's going back a long way. I think Metro Atlanta is going to eventually see some heavy rain out of this, maybe some winds, but the threat for you was much higher a couple days ago when it looked as though this thing may hit the east coast of Florida, re-emerge into the Atlantic, and then perhaps hit the Georgia coast. Right now, I'd say yes, Atlanta's most likely, you're going to get some rain out of this, sort of like Cincinnati. You may even get some wind, but most of the real problems are going to be down to your south in Florida. Nikki's saying the track has changed so much yesterday. The track was going right over me. Now, let me just say, when you look at the track, it's the forecast fan. Yeah, we put a red line down the middle of it, but I actually, when I put those graphics together, I try to take that red line out, simply because it's a forecast fan. Anywhere within that fan can get hit. That line down the middle that so many of us use, that is that's a best guess. Again, anywhere in that fan is a place that can get hit, and anyone in that fan should take this very seriously. Let's see. Keep my Fort Myers family in your prayers. Yeah, Vicky, I've got a lot of people in my prayers tonight, and I'm sure there are with all of you out there too. It's just it's scary, and you can see that red box in some of my graphics over South Florida. That's a tornado watch. Obviously, you have a landfalling hurricane, so it's got its own wind, but on the outer bands, you also have a supercell storm, sort of like what we deal with here in the Midwest, and those can very easily put down tornadoes. And unfortunately, they're all rain-wrapped because it's so humid down there. You have rain-wrapped supercell tornadoes that are put down on top of this heavy rain, on top of this storm surge, on top of the extreme wind within the eye wall that's all heading our way. What you're looking at right now, that's the radar. It's now getting close enough to Key West and our Miami radars where we can pick up some of this imagery and really show it to you. You can again see some of these strong supercells and bands coming through Miami, coming through just to the south of West Palm Beach and just to the south of Marco Island. Montgomery, Alabama, I'd say you're in the same, well, you know, I don't think you've got crazy things to worry about yet. Montgomery's far enough inland where I don't think you're going to have big issues out of this, at least at this point. But Mobile, Alabama, I'd be on the lookout for. Gulfport, Florida, that's another location where I think it's a little west of where this thing's going to make landfall. But again, that's why these next couple of hours are so crucial. What we see in the next 12 hours, when this thing turns to the north, that's what's going to gauge exactly where it makes landfall. Now, it's 4:52. Every once in a while, the Hurricane Center will put out their update a little bit early. So I want to look and see if there's any new information. I think they're doing it every hour now, but they still do the forecast discussions at these specific times. So no new information yet. It should be trickling in here in the next 5-10 minutes. So I'm going to stay on with you for the next 5-10 minutes at the very least. I'm going to actually load my show for the 6 o'clock. And because I spent most of my day here working on getting this all put together, and now I've got to go work on the forecast. Thankfully in Cincinnati it's going to be a pretty quiet one, but definitely something, definitely I've got some work ahead of me. This is downgraded. Can it get stronger again once it hits Florida? Sheila, the reason why the storm has been downgraded to a Cat 3, and by the way, it's still a major hurricane. A Category 3 hurricane is what hit New Orleans and caused all that flooding and the dam to basically be breached. So a Category 3, while it's not as windy as a Category 5 or as powerful as a Category 5, can still do significant damage. The reason why it's weakened is look how close that eye is, that dark part in the center of your screen. Look how close that eye wall is to the Cuba coast. Hurricanes derive their energy from warm water. So when you have a mountainous island like Cuba and maybe some slightly drier air being pulled into the system by being so close to Cuba and fairly close to Florida, that could temporarily weaken it. But now that it's going to be moving, or you can see the forecast path there, moving right back into basically the Gulf of Mexico and the Straits of Florida, you're talking about temperatures that are 85, 90 degree water. And we often describe it as bath water. It's just that warm. And that's what's going to help to intensify Irma over the coming hours. The forecast has it going back to a Category 4. We can't rule out it strengthening to a Category 5. We can't rule that out. And the longer this thing stays over the Gulf, the more likely it is to go back to a 4. There is an upper level trough to Florida, which is helping to steer this off to the north, and we're hoping that in a day or so there'll be enough shear in the environment. And shear is basically winds at different speeds at different altitudes. That's one kind of shear. And another kind of shear is winds coming from different directions. Both kinds of shear like that can help take sort of a perfect, I guess the best way to describe it is if you fill your bathtub with water and then you sort of let all the water go down the drain, you have a little vortex that formed. Well, if you stick your finger next to that vortex, it sometimes disturbs the spin. It'll spin over to the left, or sometimes it'll just close and won't be quite as clear. Well, it's the same thing with a hurricane like this. Instead of your finger, obviously, it's the mountains of Cuba. It's the landmass of Florida, which disturbs the circulation. and keeps it from being quite as tight and quite as powerful. But again, the longer this thing stays over the Gulf Stream, the Straits of Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, the more powerful this is going to be. So in one sense, if it was to hit the southern tip of Florida, it would start weakening, and in one way that would be good news, but obviously bad news for Miami, bad news for the Keys, bad news for Marco. And if this was to swing out into the Gulf, that'd be fantastic news for the southern tip of Florida, but it would be terrible news because this sucker would strengthen as it heads towards perhaps the Panhandle. So yeah, there are no good scenarios with a storm like this. You almost feel bad. Last night I was sort of doing a few prayers hoping that it would stay south and hit Cuba, but man, Cuba's a second, third world country. You're wishing a lot of pain on those people when you do something like that. There are no winners in a situation like this, and it's just we all have to come together and help out as much as we can. Yesterday I did a story on Matthew 25 Ministries, and it's amazing how many people in the Cincinnati area are trying to do what they can to help, donating water, donating baby goods, baby food, diapers, things like that, because right now a lot of that's going to the victims of Harvey, but when Irma makes landfall, I think we're going to have some more people suffering down across southern Florida. So let's see. Yeah, it's still going west. The last couple frames maybe have it tweaking a little further north. It may have started that northerly turn if you look real close. It seems like that's what's going on. And let's see, we have still no updates. Should happen here real soon. Let me see. I'm going to drag that back. I think that's the same path we had earlier. No, I think they updated the path. I think they updated that path. Looks like it was shifted just a little further off to the west. You know, the same thing we've been seeing. It looks like the center of the path would take it right across basically Naples. It looks like the center of the new path would be right around Naples, going right over Tampa, Sarasota, and along the coast. The further west trajectory would keep it out in the Gulf of Mexico, possibly hitting places like Panama City and Destin. Yeah, there's some. Those computer models seem to be trending a little further west too. Central and the east coast of Florida at least look as though they'll be missing the brunt. You can't give everybody the all clear because that's when everyone rushes home and then all of a sudden they get whacked. But right now I'd say the east coast of Florida, obviously you're being impacted by that tornado watch, and West Palm Beach and Miami are being impacted by the outer bands of Irma. But it looks as though the worst of Irma is going to be impacting the west coast of Florida and perhaps even the Panhandle if this thing stays out in the Gulf. What I'm waiting for is the Hurricane Center puts out a really nice forecast discussion, and it's you know, to a meteorologist it's good reading, so they just put that out. So I'm gonna just get quiet here while I'm reading, or I can read it out loud. Data from a NOAA Hurricane Hunter plane sampling Irma indicate that the hurricane has not recovered yet from its interaction with Cuba. It's estimated that the maximum winds are 110 knots, giving the excellent satellite presentation, the lower pressure just reported by the NOAA plane, and the fact that the hurricane will move over warm waters of the Straits of Florida. Some intensification is anticipated during the next 24 hours. So basically exactly what we were talking about. We looked at the eye. It's got clouds in it. The circulation's a little disturbed because of it moving so close to Cuba. I believe 110 knots still is 126 or so miles per hour. If you convert that over real quick, that means it's still a very powerful Category 3 storm. And they're saying exactly what we've been talking about here for the last hour or so. How it's going to move into the Straits of Florida. You've got the Gulf of Mexico. You have the Gulf Stream rolling through there. Plenty of warm water, and that re-intensification is possible. Let's see what else they have to say. Irma is expected to remain a dangerous hurricane while it moves near or over Florida and near or over the Florida Peninsula. After 48 hours, Irma will be moving farther inland and weakening. Radar data indicates that Irma is moving towards the west-northwest at 8 knots. So I think that's about 12 miles an hour. Yeah, there's the latest forecast fan. You can see how it still looks like Naples, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island. Those are all areas that are within the center of that forecast path. The track guidance continues to be tightly packed, and the bulk of the models take the hurricane over the Florida Keys and near or over the Florida Peninsula. The National Hurricane Center forecast is in the middle of the guidance envelope, and given the good agreement among models, the confidence in the forecast track is high. So they're banking on this north turn here. They're saying their confidence in this is fairly high because all these computer models seem to be agreeing on the same output. I will say that the same output that was very solidly having this at the east coast of Florida, that's also shifted 50 to 100 miles off to the west. So there still can be some shifts, but they're very confident that this thing is going to make a northerly turn here shortly. Key messages. Irma is expected to bring life-threatening wind and storm surge to the Florida Keys and southwestern Florida as an extremely dangerous major hurricane tonight through Saturday. Preparations in southwest Florida should be completed within the next few hours as tropical storm force winds are expected to begin tonight. There's imminent danger of life-threatening storm surge, flooding in portions of central and southern Florida, including the Florida Keys, where a storm surge warning is in effect. The threat of catastrophic storm surge flooding is highest along the southwest coast of Florida. Friends in Marco Island, that's you, where 10 to 15 feet of inundation above ground level is expected. This is a life-threatening situation, and everyone in these areas should immediately follow any evacuation instructions from local officials. Irma will bring life-threatening wind impacts to much of Florida regardless of the exact track of the center. Wind hazards from Irma are also expected to spread northward through much of Georgia and portions of South Carolina and Alabama. So that's the latest from the Hurricane Center. Guys, I will come back as often as I can. I have to get my show ready for the 6. I only have an hour left, so I'm going to have to mute this and get to work. But I'm going to try to keep this up to date as much as I can as I go on through the evening. I'll try to chime in as much as I can. I probably won't give you another update until maybe 7:15, 7:30, simply because our newscast goes from 6 to 7. So I'll do what I can, but I'm going to leave this running. I'm going to have to move it for just 1 second, but I'm going to leave this running so you can get a constant feed of what's happening, what's going on. All the data, all the statistics automatically update on all these graphics, so everything you're seeing is basically up to the minute data. So again, I'll be muting this, and I'm going to get it back to full screen for you in just a second.
But let me bring you up to speed with what's going on tonight. We're experiencing periods of very heavy winds